that then's when Satan come to tempt him. Satan wasn't talking to him before then because Satan understood, like we need to understand, at the hunger of our life, in those weak moments, those are the times that we do some really crazy things. And there's a famine in the land that affects, it causes hunger. It causes hunger. Can I just be honest with you? Well, I just feel like this is my opinion. If you don't agree with me, just high five yourself and say he's wrong. Do you know why there's so many religions and so many New Age movements and so many self-help books? And there's some of them that are good, but there's just some of them that are crazy. I'm telling you what. The reason I say that they're crazy is because books that say stuff like this, that, you know, God is everywhere. He's in everything. I have just a little bit of problem with that because if God is in everything, then it deteriorates and takes away from the fact that Jesus is the only way to God, right? And even though it's a good principle and it has good purpose, we have to be careful with that. And the reason there's so many things like that is because there's been a famine for so long that people have been so hungry for the void to be filled that only God can fill, that they've got so desperate that they look anywhere and everywhere because they come to the church looking for it, but it wasn't there. Because you can have church in it and absolutely have no God in it whatsoever. As a matter of fact, it would be very easy to double this church in just a few months, even a few weeks, sometimes even a few days. But even though the church would double, we still wouldn't be adding to the church because it's so easy just to call somebody up and say, why don't you leave your church and come to mine because this is going on or that's going on, and take somebody else. And we're not really adding to the church, right? Even though we might be growing in numbers, we're really decreasing in power because we're just spending all of our time borrowing somebody. I don't want anybody that's borrowed. I'm telling you, I'd rather have somebody fresh. I'd rather have somebody, because the reason I come is not to take away from anybody or anything because whatever they've got going is great, but I just feel like God's called us to take some people that haven't been reached up to this point, that are hungry and thirsting after some righteousness, which is right standing, that has a desire to say, you know what, I've never seen modeled what I'm looking for, but I'm open to understand that if God can get a hold of my life, I believe something can change. It's called hunger. It's called hunger. And it causes you to do strange things. And I found that the way that you fulfill those hunger tells a lot about your character. It really does. There are some people that hunger after spiritual things and try to fulfill that with physical things. There are some people in marriages that get to the place, if there's a spiritual principle of relationship between a man and a woman, that God correlated it for to work only between a man and a woman. And if that thing is void, what happens? They try to fill it with an external source called an affair. Because there's a spiritual principle of connection that happens that brings unity and oneness and bonding. And if that's not there, that void has to be filled. And a hunger develops to the point that instead of looking to the person that they said I do to, they find or try to look for that in somebody else outside the covenant of marriage. Why? Because they're hungering for something. They're hungering for something. Goes the same way. There's some people that are just bound up by addictions of food, addiction of drug, different things. And the reason they're doing that, can I just be honest with you? One reason why I find that in my dealings with people that are addicts in any case, I'm not just talking about hardcore drug, I'm talking about not being able to put ice cream down. Because it goes both ways, because you can still kill yourself the same way. It amazes me because those people that generally are in that state and can't get off that, and just as a side note, if I had someone ask me just the other day, why can I not get free from this? And I just had to tell them and be truth about it. Until your desire to be free becomes greater than your desire to feel good, you'll never be free. But the reason that they can't get off of that is because in that moment that they're caught up in it, a hunger is satisfied inside of them for a temporary time. And although it may not last, it might last 5, 10 minutes for some people. You might do something really hard and it'll be out 6, 7 hours, or might even be a day or two. And whenever you come down, what happens? You're still hungry. So you have to keep going back to that. And if we could really understand, it's an internal hunger that causes us to try to feed it with external sources. It's called famine. It's called famine. Is anybody hungry? I just want to know. Well, we're sitting here talking about hunger. I can see your face. You're almost salivating, everything just dripping down off your jaw. We see that Pharaoh's in a state, and remember, like I said, he's not a saved man, but he's wise. He's wise. And he has a dream about 7 cows coming up fat and nice and plump and round and everything. Then he had 7 more cows that came up that were skinny and famine struck. And then he blinked his eyes, and what happened was he saw 7 ears of corn coming up that were full and plentiful and bountiful. Then he saw 7 more ears coming up that were withered and dried up and not of any use. And he got hungry because the thing he was seeing, he didn't understand. Has anybody ever had God show you something that just stirs up a hunger on the inside of you? Has anybody ever been there? I'll be honest with you. The way God speaks to me most of my life is he will show me something so far down the road that seems so impossible that I have to step up to the challenge and say, God, I'm hungry because I've got to even know how that's even going to work, because I know myself and I know what I can do. I know what I can't do. And there's just no way that will happen. There's just no way. And there's just some things that we're going to reveal in January that God has shown, and hopefully this will spark a hunger in you about what God's going to do with this church. And I'm just going to be honest with you. I don't even know how it's going to be done, but that's what makes it God. Pharaoh wasn't even a saved man, but had a hunger inside of him to know what God was saying. And I could just stop right here and spend all night, because if we could ever stop trying to fulfill our appetite with a song, or stop trying to fill our appetite with a good feeling or a pat on the back, and ever just develop a hunger and really want to know what God's saying, it would absolutely change everything. It would. But the issues we have is we've got Madam Cleo telling us what God's saying. We got 1-900-CALL ME, I'll make you happy, trying to tell you what God's saying. We've got blogs now. If you don't know what that is, just raise your hand. We'll send you a class to it. We've got we've got website. We've got a newsletter. We've got all kinds of people that's telling us what God said. I see this happening. I see that happening. I get very weary with people that's just seeing things happening. This is coming to pass, or that one day this will happen. I'm looking for some people that's knowing what God's doing right now. It's great to see what's happening in the future. Let's talk about what God's trying to do right now. Because the whole issue with Pharaoh is he could see through his dream what was happening in the future, but he had no idea how to relate that to the present. And if we could ever get to the state that in all of our singing about God, we can understand what it means right now. Somebody say now. Now faith is, right? You don't have to have faith to reach out into the future. You can wait on it. That'll come to you. You have to have faith, though, to step out right now on what you see coming to pass. And the thing is, it makes you look very, very foolish. Has anybody ever been there? It says, God will tell you to do something. We just had a situation. Our sister tonight obeyed God and did something. I'm sure she probably felt crazy doing it when she walked up to us and began to tell us her story. But she obeyed God, and through faith, she stepped out. And I believe God really did something in your life down here just a moment ago. I really mean that. I do. Because it's amazing. Whenever you open up yourself and say, God, will you explain to me? Guess what? He does answer. I want to make sure everyone didn't miss that, but God will answer to you. Can I go ahead and jump into this thing so I can let you go home? Is that clock right? Is it about 8 o'clock? Can somebody look at your watch? I didn't bring it with me. Just shake your head if it's right. Okay, if I go too long, take your watch off and throw it at me, okay? Will you do that for me? All right. We're talking about Joseph. If we just talk about him just a little bit, he was a faithful man. He was upright. He was a godly man. And his life was miserable at the beginning. It was miserable. I don't know about you. Is there anybody saved? Can I just see somebody waving? And if you don't know what that means, we can pray for you. But is there anybody that just gave your life to God and said, do with it what you please, God? That's really all being saved is? Then if you're in that state, can you just tell me by just a simple nod, if you just blink your eyes or like Samantha, wiggle your nose and just let me know, you know what I'm talking about. Just let me know that. Whenever you got saved, everyone told you it's going to be so nice and pleasant, and it was for a day or two. And then something happened, and you smacked up against that brick wall. And you found yourself in a miserable state. And then to make it worse, people come up to you and say things like, you're just called by God. And you're going to have this kind of ministry. And then you got preachers preaching to you like me that won't let you stay the same, but it's constantly trying to pick you up and push you into the future to do more than what you're currently doing so you don't just stay the same forever. And if you've ever been like that, then you understand sometimes it's frustrating to know that you have potential inside of you. And the reason we have frustration is because we know there's more in us than what's getting out of us, right? Because if we didn't know there was more in us, we'd be happy just the fact we woke up today. We'd be happy with what's going on. We could smile through everything because we realize that we're just living for today. But whenever you know there's something greater inside of you that hasn't happened on the outside of you yet, it frustrates you. This was the place that Joseph was in. He was a man that was godly, that was in right standing. He was a little bit of a smart aleck, and he had a lot of things going for him. But here he was, forsaken by his brothers. He was forgotten by his father. He was sold into slavery, lied on after he got a nice job out of slavery and got thrown in and become an inmate and lost his right to vote and everything else and was living in prison, but he was still gifted. And he used his gift to tell what the butler and the baker's dreams meant. The first thing it tells me is that no matter where you are, you cannot be discriminatory about who you use your gift on. Because if Joseph would have said, I'm locked up, I can't do anything for God, I'm not in the place, I'm not in the pulpit, I'm not a pastor, I'm not a singer, I'm not in the place to be used by God.